Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Namaskar. You have stepped into a course that is going to change the way that you look at data. Not just how you analyze it, but also how you communicate it. My name is Nivid Desai. I serve as the Program Executive at Writing Studio IIT Gandhinagar. Welcome to Writing for Data Science. This course is at the intersection of analysis and communication. As all of us know, data analysis is not just about coding and models. It is about solving real-world problems. And that is exactly why every single thought that goes into solving those problems needs to be communicated. And not just to one audience, across multiple stakeholders. That is where this course comes in. This course prepares you with the foundations of writing, especially curated for data science. We will discuss audience analysis, critical thinking, logical reasoning, as well as storytelling that is native to data science. So join me on a journey at the intersection of numbers and narratives. I'll see you in class. Namaste, hello and welcome to Writing for Data Science. My name is Nivid Desai and we are on a journey to explore the interesting intersections between numbers and narratives. We have gained significant exposure through the course of this module into the fundamentals of storytelling in data. So it naturally follows that this lecture is going to discuss something a bit advanced in the realm of data storytelling. We looked at structures, arcs, and characters. So what follows next? The where and the how, the setting and the context of data storytelling. Our goals for today's lecture is to understand the concepts of setting and context in storytelling. Then we will see within our specific definition what their roles are in data storytelling. Then we will learn how different contexts can change the meaning and effect of a data narrative. And then we will discover how to identify and articulate contextual tensions. I understand that many of these words will be new. Don't worry, we will take it slow and we will take our time by understanding each term in significant detail with enough examples and reflections and exercises on our way. Let us first understand what is setting in storytelling. Setting is the environment in which a story unfolds, as simple as that. But a setting is not a monolith. It has multiple different factors working in synergy to create the setting of a story. For example, time, place, atmosphere, socio-political conditions. All of these are setting within which a story takes place, within which our characters, our structure, our arc, all of this happens within these building blocks of the universe of our story. However, when we talk about data storytelling, we need to be slightly more specific. Apart from all of these, of course these are relevant. Apart from all of these, three more factors become part of our setting: domain, stakeholders, and constraints where the data lives. All of these will create the setting in which our data story unfolds. For example, let's say we are telling a story about improving air quality in Ahmedabad. The place is clear. Ahmedabad, a city in Gujarat, much close to where I am right now in IIT Gandhinagar. This is the place of our setting, the story. The setting then includes the time, as in post-implementation of the Air Information and Response Plan 2017 onwards. This is the time frame within which our story will unfold. Then there is a place, and not just the obvious place statement of Ahmedabad, the city, but urban Ahmedabad, with a focus on traffic and industrial zones. This nuance, this detail becomes an important part of laying out the setting of a story. Then there are environmental conditions, as in monsoon effects, green cover expansion, and community awareness drives. All of them become part of the setting of the story. Now that this entire synergy of time, place, and environmental conditions has created the universe of the story, now the story can begin. This is why the settings play important roles in contributing different situations throughout the journey of our characters and our narrative arcs. Let's reflect a bit on this question. Think of a data set that you have worked with. Can you recognize its setting? Who did it involve? When and where was it relevant? This will help us refine our understanding of what a setting is and why it matters within our entire data storytelling realm. Now that we have understood what a setting is, both in general purpose storytelling as well as our specific focus of data storytelling, let us look at the second half of today's lecture, context. Context refers to the circumstances or conditions that give meaning to data. It is what helps an audience interpret the why behind the numbers. Why do these numbers emerge? What are the conditions within which the numbers emerge? All of these will build the overall context of a data story. Just like the setting, a context is also not a monolith. It has multiple different factors interplaying with each other to build a nuanced context, a rather complicated context of a story. For example, the social context. Who is affected and how? This question answers the social context of a story. Then there is the historical context, as in what has led to the current data trends. This tells you the passage of time that has led up to the current trend that we are exploring. Then there is an institutional or economic context. Questions such as which policies, systems, or constraints are influencing the data, these questions will give you an idea of the institutional or economic context of a story. For example, let's look at women in STEM in India. STEM is the acronym for science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. If data shows an increase in female enrollment in engineering colleges in Tamil Nadu, the context might include sustained government scholarship schemes, improved school infrastructure in rural areas, and then community level awareness programs promoting higher education for girls. This context helps frame the numbers as a success story of inclusive education and policy impact, both of them. Depending on which context you choose, the framing of the story will also evolve as the time goes on. The framing of the story will make it effective and will make the audience aware of just how many components the story is affecting at large. Otherwise, just plain data laying on the page may not create that kind of an effect where the audience will be able to understand the impact of that data. Let's do a little exercise in this case. Take the data point, women make up 35% of new STEM students in a state. Write down 3 positive contexts that could explain this figure. This is a progressive data point. So if you would like to think of 3 positive contexts, they will end up explaining how it has led to this outcome. Here's a little prompt for you if it can help you. Think about government support, local role models, and awareness efforts. These would be the different positive contexts. You can write down all these different points or even more than them, but explain them in a way that a reader can understand. Now that we have understood what setting and context these two terms mean, let us look at why they are essential in data storytelling. Setting and context shape the interpretation of our data. The same data can lead to different conclusions depending on the context and setting that we have defined in our narrative. Setting and context also define relevance. Without context, audiences cannot assess why a data point matters. For example, if a historical context has not been provided, people will not understand how far the progress of a situation has come if you do not have a point of comparison from the past. And in the end, setting and context also affect trust. A story with poor or missing context can be perceived as manipulative or shallow. And that is something completely undesirable. If you do not provide context, your readers will find it difficult to trust the kind of assessment and conclusion that you have brought with your data. In the end, a context and setting help make a story concrete, help make a story impactful, and the readers will be on board with the suggestions and recommendations that you are offering at the end of your narrative if your setting and context are strong enough. Here's an example to help us understand what do we mean by all these three principles. Let's look at startup growth in tier 2 cities in India. Data might show an uptick in tech startups in Indore and Coimbatore, but the context includes access to better digital infrastructure, local incubation centers, and hackathons, young skilled graduates returning to hometowns. All of these will frame your story as a rising wave of distributed innovation. If you see, it will not just present a data as it is, it will turn it into a context dependent and context empowered story so that your audience can truly understand the impact of this movement, of this new trend of change. This kind of a design makes the data exciting and relevant because it is associating all the different changes happening around these cities with the data insight that we are going to share with our audience. This is what good context can do. This is why it is absolutely essential to move from our foundational understanding of structures, arcs, and characters into an advanced level understanding of setting and context. Reflect on this question before we move forward. What stories have you seen where context added hope or showed change happening on the ground? They can be from news, they can be from technical reports, or they can be from fiction. But any added context needs to add hope or shows change happening on the ground. This is my condition for you. So, do a quick reflection. Think about a story that gives you that kind of flavor, where an added context gives you much better grounding into the story. Coming up is a rather interesting subject of conflicts in contextual framing. What do I mean by that? Reflect on this question and I will get back to you. Let us look at what conflicts can arise in contextual framing. Sometimes the same data can support different storylines depending on what context is emphasized. If you see, this is also something that happens quite frequently in our journalism, in our media spaces, and also in day to day rhetoric that is catered to us from different channels of media. They use the same data point to arrive at different conclusions based on the kind of contexts that they want to emphasize. I understand if on the surface this may look like manipulation, but the proof of the pudding is in the eating. It is not about what kind of tactics are used, it is about why those tactics are used. So, when you and I talk about using the same data for different contexts, we are not doing it to manipulate our audiences. We are doing so to have a purposeful framing of the story to serve the right audience. So, when we talk about the conflicts emerging in framing context, we are not doing that for manipulative purposes. We are doing so so that our audience can associate with the conflict that the data has at its heart. Let us look at some different kinds of conflicts which will help us understand how context should be emphasized to highlight that conflict and associate with our audiences. Here is an example of constructive conflict. For example, let's look at digital health records. A data story about the Ayushman Bharat digital mission can be framed in two ways. There is, of course, an optimistic context in which more than 50 crore health IDs are created, helping patients carry their history across hospitals. This is something optimistic, something that gives us hope, a positive story to tell. However, there is also a constructive challenge. Rural uptake is slower, suggesting need for further literacy and access programs. Now, we are reporting both of them. We are not only relying on the optimistic side, and we are not only giving the constructive challenge. I'm sure you would understand that overemphasizing on either one of these sides will be counted as manipulation. But when we learn it through a conscientious manner, when our conscience is properly aligned, we report both of them so that our data story becomes enriched and does not mislead our audience into believing something or the other. Because both of these facts are true. The optimistic context is also true, and there exists a constructive challenge, which is also true. Together, they guide improvement while celebrating progress. So, it is acknowledging what a job well done is, and it is also giving new directions for further improvement in the story that we are telling. Again, overemphasizing on either one of these contexts will be counted as manipulation. Please steer clear from that kind of malpractice. Narrative building is an extremely sensitive thing. I hope that by now you would have understood that all that we have studied can both be used and abused. But we need to align our conscience. All the ethical reasoning that we have studied in the previous module needs to also be associated here. Our ethical practice of processing, analyzing, and communicating data will help us connect authentically with our audience with a clear intention of informing, persuading, and impacting, not manipulating, not misleading. Here's a quick exercise for you. Take a data set about school internet access. You will find it easily online. Create one narrative about what has improved and one about what is still needed. This is where you focus on contrast without criticism. You report both of them and connect them in a way that celebrates the progress as well as opens further doors for improvement. Do not rely heavily on either one of these sides like I said, it will be counted as malpractice, it will be counted as manipulation. Now that we have understood that there might be some conflicts arising in context setting, let's look at setting in context to empower stories. They are narrative choices, like we have discussed. They are not just factual inclusions. You don't just add these facts to make your story whole. They are interwoven into your narrative design. They act as anchors that determine the tone of your story, as in, do you want it to be optimistic versus cautionary? They also determine the narrative scope and direction of your story, as in, is it an individual case or is it a systematic issue? And it also talks about stakeholder relevance and audience engagement. All of this is determined by your setting and context. The kind of environment, kind of atmosphere that you have built around your story will determine the tone, the scope, and the audience engagement of your story. Let's look at an example. Let's look at green energy adoption for our case study. Telling the story of solar panel use in rural Rajasthan is not just about what's generated. Context adds layers. If you talk about the women led self help groups managing the installations, if you talk about government incentives, if you talk about increased evening study hours for students, this story becomes a story about energy, education, and empowerment. You can look up what first order effects, second order effects, and third order effects are. They will give you a further structure to think about it. We are not covering this because it is not part of our curriculum, but I'm just giving this to you as a recommendation. Look up what a first order effect, second order effect, and third order effect are. They will give you some tools to start merging with your narrative design. In the end of this lecture, I want to talk about framing change with setting and context. Understanding setting and context helps data communicators show transformation, not just problems. It can help them connect data with human outcomes and encourage solutions, not just diagnosis. Based on all of these principles, you can build stories that engage and inspire. And do all of this conscientiously, meaning you need to do this for the right reasons with a principled outlook of narrative building, not for manipulation or for misleading. So that was it from my side for this lecture. We were looking at setting and context, two slightly advanced topics for our scope of data storytelling. I hope that all of these and more will help you enrich your overall understanding of how to create narratives within data. In the next lecture, we will look at some more factors at a slightly more advanced level of what we understand as data narratives. Until then, all the best, stay curious, keep learning. I'll see you in the next class. Thank you so much. Namaskar.